haven't heard Tom Friedman speak, you are really in for a treat. His analytical skills are virtually unmatched. And if you have not read the book, his latest book, I won't say the book, if you haven't read the book, his latest one, That Used to Be Us, you need to. I have it sitting right at home. I read it, and it is absolutely profound. And frankly, entirely relevant, you know, to what our purposes are here today. Tom and I had a chance to chat a little bit earlier, and I was telling him that we have a really eclectic group here of people who are policymakers, people who are leading various efforts in the city, all towards helping us reform and create a cohesive workforce development system here in the city. And frankly, his book is sobering. It's compelling, and it talks about where America was, and it talks about where America is, and it's a very hopeful presentation also because he says America is such a great nation that there's no question that we can get back to where we have been. He's been with the New York Times, I think, since 1981, and is just absolutely noted. He is respected, revered, frankly, all across the nation. And I'm just delighted that he has chosen to come and be with us today because he has such a powerful message. So please join me in welcoming Tom Friedman.
It's a treat to be here. It's great to do a neighborhood concert, as Paul Simon said at Central Park. I don't get actually invited very often to speak in D.C. I get invited to speak in Amman and Indonesia, so I was thrilled when the mayor called and asked if I could give a talk about my latest thinking. I'm deeply invested in Washington, D.C., although I live in Bethesda. My daughter has been a teacher in DCPS for the last 5 years. Anyone here from DCPS? The public school system? Anyone here from? No, I guess not. Okay. My daughter was a teacher at Murch Elementary. She did Teach for America in D.C., public school system, and my wife is chairman of the Seed Foundation Charter School. So we've got a lot going in D.C. and feel deeply invested in this community and its success, and really feel that it's got wonderful momentum under Mayor Gray, and so I'm really honored to be here this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about my latest book, That Used to Be Us, How America Lost Its Way and the World It Invented and How We Can Come Back. I know some of you have read it, those of you who haven't, I know who you are. I know your boss, I know who you are, okay? So whenever we tell people the title of the book, I wrote this with my friend Michael Mandelbaum, a professor of international relations at Johns Hopkins SAIS, right here downtown. And whenever we tell people the title of the book, That Used to Be Us, their first question always is, but does it have a happy ending? And we tell everyone it does. We just don't know yet whether it's fiction or nonfiction. We're working on that. Now, you may wonder, how did two foreign policy geeks, I'm the foreign affairs columnist for the New York Times, my co-author, as I said, is the chaired professor of international relations at Johns Hopkins SAIS. How did two foreign policy geeks end up writing a book about basically domestic American politics? And the answer is very simple. We're neighbors, longtime friends. We speak every morning. Have for the last 20 years almost, much to the chagrin of our spouses. We would start every day talking about the world for 20 years. But we noticed something about 3-4 years ago. We'd start every day talking about the world, but we'd end every day talking about America. And it became obvious to us that America, its fate, future, vigor, and vitality, was really the biggest foreign policy issue in the world. Because Michael and I, we're sort of old-fashioned American nationalists. We believe America makes a lot of mistakes in the world, as any great power would. But on balance, we believe America plays a hugely constructive role in balancing the global system. And if we go weak or go dark or become enfeebled, your kids won't just grow up in a different Washington, D.C. They will grow up in a fundamentally different world. So there's a lot at stake right now. There's a lot at stake in our ability to pass on the American dream to another generation, which I know is at the center of your enterprise right here. Now, the basic argument of our book is that America today faces 4 great challenges, I would argue. And I'm going to focus on just one of them, which is the one that's, I think, at the sweet spot of where you're working, which is how we manage the intersection of the merger of globalization and the IT revolution, which we believe and argue is actually the biggest thing happening on the planet today. And that is a workforce problem, and that is an education problem, and that is an entrepreneurship opportunity. So I'm going to talk about that in detail, but let me talk first of all just about the 4 great challenges that I think we face today. The first is understanding how we got here as a country. How did we get here? How did we become the world's richest, most powerful country? We actually didn't get here by accident. We actually got here because we had a formula for success. And it's a formula that dates back to our founding fathers, to Hamilton, to Lincoln, to Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, Eisenhower. Every great president actually enriched this formula for success. And it had 5 great pillars. The first was educate our people up to and beyond whatever the technology was so that they can use it and get the most out of it. When it was the cotton gin, that meant universal primary education. When it was the factory, that meant universal secondary education. And now that it's the laptop and the supercomputer, that means some form of universal post-secondary education. Second, we offered people the best infrastructure, roads, airports, telecommunications, bandwidth, to engage in commerce and education and get the most, basically, out of the future. Third, we had the world's most open in this century, or in the last century, immigration policy. It's how we all got here. We attracted both the most energetic and the talented immigrants, first-round intellectual draft choices from around the world, where they came to our shores to start 30 to 40% of new companies in Silicon Valley every year. Fourth, we had the best institutions and rules and regulations to incentivize risk-taking and to prevent recklessness. And lastly, we had the most government-funded research to push out the boundaries of science and physics and chemistry and biology so our smartest entrepreneurs and most creative people could pluck off these flowers and start many, many new companies. That was our 5-part formula for success. That is how we got here. So I get a little upset when I hear people saying, I was just one lonely guy out there. I did this all by myself. You didn't do anything by yourself. Did you build those roads? Did you build those courts? Did you fund that research by yourself? One of my favorite quotes in the book is from Bob Inglis, a Republican congressman from South Carolina, one of 2 Republican congressmen to lose to a Tea Party candidate in the last by-election. He tells about being at a town hall meeting in South Carolina. Gets to question time. Elderly man stands up and wags a finger at him. He says, "Congressman, keep your government hands off my Medicare." Keep your government hands off my Medicare. As he says in the book, where do I start? Where do I even start the conversation? So the first thing we need is to understand we got here because we had the greatest, and this room is a testimony to it, public-private partnership in the history of the world. The public enables the private, and the private is enabled and enriches the public. That's how we got here. And we have to never, ever lose sight of that. Now let's be honest. Let's look at that 5-part formula for success today. Education, well, if you look at the PISA test, 15-year-olds, comparison around the world, we're now in the middle of the pack with Argentina and Slovenia in math, science, and reading comprehension. Lovely countries, but not historically our peers. Infrastructure, well, if you recently flew from Hong Kong to LAX, Los Angeles Airport, that's like flying from the Jetsons to the Flintstones, okay? LAX is a kind of wonderful 1950s retro diner feel, only, you know, it actually is a 1950s retro diner. Immigration, well, I'm sure a lot of you followed the Republican debates. It was who could build more electric fences. I see you an electric fence and I raise you an electric fence. The message was, come here, get educated, that's okay, and then get the hell out of our country and go home and start companies that will compete with us. That's our immigration policy today. God bless President Obama for the initiative he just put forward the other day. Rules and regulations. How'd you like that subprime crisis? Oh, you want to buy an $800,000 home and you only can show $15,000 in income and your only ID is your Delta Sky Miles card? You get a mortgage, okay? We've had a real breakdown in rules and regulations, gone from sustainable values to situational values. Just do whatever the situation allows. And lastly, government-funded research. Have you seen that graph? It looks like an EKG heading for a heart attack, okay? So if you actually think about all the ingredients of our great public-private partnership, they're all on the wane right now. And that is problem number one, understanding how we got great and enriching and reinvesting in that formula. Second, big challenge we face obviously is debt deficit and entitlements. You know all about all those issues. I'm not going to get into it today. Third great issue we face is, I argue, energy and climate, how we power the future of middle class in America and around the world without tipping our planet into terrible pollution and disruptive climate change. That's the third. The fourth, though, and this is what I want to talk about today, is how we manage actually the biggest thing happening on the planet today. The thing that we'd all be talking about if we weren't talking about the subprime crisis or 9/11, and that is the merger of globalization and the IT revolution. It's actually the biggest thing happening today. It's the thing driving everything else, and we're really not talking about it. We barely understand. Now, this is an issue that I'm very sensitive to because back in 2004, I sat down to write a book about this process called The World is Flat. And it basically argued we're all getting connected, so much so that we all have kind of equal access to all these technologies and opportunities. The world is getting flat. Well, when I sat down to write this book, one of the first things I did was get the first edition of The World is Flat off the bookshelf. It came out in 2005. Now, as I said, that book argued that we are all getting connected. So I got that first book because I felt something had happened, that we'd actually gone from connected to hyper-connected. I could feel it just looking around. So I got that first book, first edition of The World is Flat off the bookshelf. I cracked it open to the index, looked under index A, B, C, D, E, F, 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 A. Facebook wasn't in it. So when I was out there in 2005 saying the world is flat, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was still a sound. The cloud was still in the sky. 4G was a parking place. LinkedIn was a prison. Applications were what you sent to college. And for most people, Skype was a typo. Okay. I love doing that, Mayor. Can I do that again? Okay. All of that happened after I said the world is flat. So what's actually happened is we have very quietly gone from connected to hyper-connected. And I see signs of this everywhere. So when the world was just connected, when I said the world is flat, I said we had connected Boston and Bangalore in India. But we've now connected Boston, Bangalore, and Surrey. Yeah, Surrey, that's a town 90 miles to the interior with 90,000 people who now all have these web-enabled cell phones. And they're on the grid with your kids and mine. Oh, when I wrote The World is Flat, I said we'd connected Detroit and Damascus, Syria. We've now connected Detroit, Damascus, and Dera. Where's Dera? Oh, Dera is the dusty Syrian border town on the Syrian-Jordanian border where the Syrian Revolution began. And you know what? You've been watching the Syrian Revolution live on TV, those kind of grainy videos, because thanks to these, the Syrian government has banned every news organization in the world, including Al Jazeera. But thanks to these flip cams, web-enabled video, and cell phone cameras, All the revolutionaries have been dumping their video into a virtual network called SNN, Sham News Network. Sham is Arabic for Syria. It's a YouTube creation where we now watch it live. Despite the fact that they've banned every news organization in the world, there are enough, the people at this table in front of me have in their wallets right now enough money to have started Sham News Network. That's going from connected to hyper-connected. But I see these signs everywhere. You know, whenever I travel, I love to collect little items from the newspaper. In October 30th, 2010, I was in India, and the Hindustan Times that morning ran a news item reporting that a Nepali telecommunications firm had just started providing 3G mobile network service at the summit of Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain. The story said this would, quote, allow thousands of climbers and trekkers who throng the region every year access to high-speed internet and video calls using their mobile phones from the world's tallest summit. Do you realize how many phone calls are now being made today from the top of Mount Everest that begin, "Mom, you'll never guess where I'm calling you from"? That's a hyper-connected world. But we also see it in education. Oh, yes, we do. So my wife's from Iowa originally. Her mother went to Grinnell College, wonderful liberal arts school, Central Iowa, 1,600 students. Her mother, God bless her, became chairman of the board one day. Wonderful college. Last year, Grinnell College, 9% of all applications came from China. Of that 9%, 43% had perfect 800s on their math SATs. 255 applications to Grinnell College in Central Iowa. Don't know about you, I graduated Brandeis 1975. We had a Chinese exchange student, Li Zhao, great guy, taught us all how to eat with chopsticks. Get that out of your head, okay? You want your kids to go to Grinnell, okay? Next year, they will be competing against 255 students from China, 43%, with perfect 800s on their math SATs. If you think you're competing with the school down the street, not in a hyper-connected world. Get that out of your head. So what does all this mean? First of all, what does it mean for the labor market? And what does it mean for education? Well, the first thing it means is in a hyper-connected world, when the world gets this hyper-connected, what really happens is that the global curve rises. That's really what's happened. The whole global curve, just in the last 5 or 6 years, that's what that Grinnell story is about, has risen. Because the admin officer at Grinnell now has access, and the students have access to Grinnell cheap, easy, faster than ever before. But that's the same for every boss in Washington, D.C. Every boss in Washington, D.C. now has more cheap, easy, efficient access to above average labor, above average genius, above average software, above average automation, and above average robotics. And hence, the central socioeconomic fact of our time, and we devote a single chapter to it in the book, is that average is over. Average in a hyper-connected world is officially over. I could have gotten into Grinnell College in 1975 with SATs of 600, average SATs. In a hyper-connected world, average is officially over. Everyone has to find their extra, that unique value contribution that will justify why they should be hired, why they should be promoted. Everyone has to find their extra. Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, very easy for you to say, Mr. Smarty Pants, New York Times columnist. No. Let me tell you about my job. So I worked just around the corner on Farragut Square, and in 1995, when I was made the New York Times Foreign Affairs columnist, I actually inherited James Reston's office at the New York Times, Washington Bureau. What an honor to inherit the office of this great columnist and editor from the 60s and 70s. Now, I suspect Mr. Reston used to come to the office every morning back in the 60s and 70s and say to himself, I wonder what my 7 competitors are going to write today. And by the way, he knew all 7 personally. Walter Lippmann, Mary McGrory, Stuart Alsop, Joe Kraft, Tony Lewis. I do the same thing. I come to the office right down the street every morning, and I say, I wonder what my 70 million competitors are going to write today. What are they going to write today? I wonder what they're going to write. I have 70 million competitors now. Every blogger, every tweeter, everyone. You want to read me on Turkey? I just came from Turkey. You can compare my column very easily. Go to Real Clear World, and you will compare my column to the best columns coming out of Turkey today. I was in India in September and visited IIT Jodhpur. So IIT is India's MITs. IIT Jodhpur was famous, brand new IIT there for inventing a $39 iPad. Now, by the way, this will be a feature of the hyper-connected world. You will see price points breaking at radical scale. So you see, they don't from 400 to 350 to 300. No, thanks to cloud computing and tools, where for 10 cents an hour, I can rent the most sophisticated storage and computing capacity in the world. You are going to see radical breaking of price points. So one of them is the $39 iPad invented by, it's nowhere near glossy and efficient and sleek as the Apple iPad, don't get me wrong, but as a wireless education tool, which is what the Indian government wanted, it's not bad. I brought one home even. Designed by 2 electrical engineers in India, one of whom comes from a village with no electricity. That's what's happening in this hyper-connected world. So I come home, I think this is cool, I want to tell people about it. I write my Sunday column about it in the New York Times. My Sunday column moves actually 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday night, on the web. Sometime between 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 8 a.m. in the morning, when you might have read it here in Washington, D.C., someone in India posted in the comment section online, right under my column, a laboratory stress test of the device I'd written about. Before you even read it, someone in India posted a lab test of the device, industrial lab test. Thank God it backed up my excitement about it, but it could have been the other way. If you don't think that doesn't keep me on my toes, thinking about what's my extra. When I was in Beirut in 1982 for the New York Times, I could write anything I wanted about Yasser Arafat. It took 6 weeks for the New York Times to wash up on Beirut's shores. And unless some guy from New York called on a scratchy long-distance line at $50 a minute, did you see what Friedman wrote about you? Who? Friedman? No, Friedman. What did he write? Who does he work for? New York Daily News? No, the New York Times. Now, your column moves at 8 p.m., and before you've read it, someone in India has already posted a lab stress test confirming or refuting what you said. So that's what's going on out there. We all need to find our extra. I was with a banker down in Dallas when I was working on the book, and he said something that really stuck in my mind. He said, Tom, today you only hire someone if you absolutely have to. That is really the motto of every boss today. He or she only hire someone if you absolutely have to. Therefore, it is incumbent on all of us to train people, to train ourselves, to absolutely have to be hired. Which is why I tell my girls, I'm an old fuddy-duddy. When I graduated from college, I got to find a job. You will have to invent a job. That's the big difference between us and our kids. Oh, you may not be your first job. You may be lucky enough to get hired in that first job. But to retain that job, to advance in that job, you're going to have to invent, reinvent, and re-engineer that job. And that's where education really has to go. I see that in my own work. I'm constantly now having to reinvent myself. So what does this mean for the labor market? Well, historically, the labor market had kind of 3 basic, I don't want to call them tiers because they weren't really tiered entirely, but the top layer, the one you all wanted to be in, the one you all are in, is people who can do critical thinking and problem solving. That's what we all want to be. We all want to be able to do critical thinking and problem solving. That means you're an engineer, you're a scientist, you're a singer, you're a songwriter, you're an athlete, you're a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a radiologist, hopefully a journalist. You need to do critical thinking and problem solving in your job cannot be described by an algorithm and therefore easily outsourced, automated, roboticized, or digitized. That's where we all want to be. Now, second tier is routine work. Top tier is non-routine work. Non-routine work requires critical thinking and problem solving. Routine work is work that was repetitive. It can be described by an algorithm, and today routine work has been crushed in the last 6 years. Absolutely crushed, whether you're working at the back room of this bank, okay, or on an assembly line. Anything that now can be automated, outsourced, digitized, or roboticized is being done. You know, the average American factory day, I don't know if you've heard this joke, it's just 2 employees, a man and a dog. The man is there to feed the dog, and the dog is there to keep the man away from the machines, okay? So that's basically where, that's directionally, that's an exaggeration, but directionally where it's going. The days when the mayor could go out and induce Ford Motor to come to Washington, D.C. and build a 5,000-person factory are over. That factory is now 250 people and 5,000 robots and software programs. So what you need, therefore, are 5 people inventing jobs for 10, 10 people inventing jobs for 20, 20 people inventing jobs for 50. That's how we get to 5,000. So the third layer of our workforce historically was non-routine local work. That's work that had to be done face-to-face in a specific location. That's your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker, your nurse, your massage therapist, your divorce lawyer. Work that has to be done in a specific location face-to-face. But the wages of your non-routine local work, these are most of the people that the mayor presides over, will depend on the number of non-routine high-skilled workers you have. It's much better to be a massage therapist in Cupertino, California, next to Apple headquarters, okay, than it is going to be in Gary, Indiana today. So that's historically the labor market. Now here's what's changing in the hyper-connected world. It's not enough anymore to say, I'm non-routine. I'm non-routine. I do critical thinking and problem solving. I'm a non-routine columnist. I'm safe. I'm non-routine. I'm a radiologist. No, excuse me. I can get your x-rays read in Bangalore today as easily as I can at a local hospital here. I'm non-routine lawyer. No, it's not enough to be a non-routine lawyer. You need to be creative non-routine. It's not enough to be a non-routine columnist. You need to be a creative columnist now. Not enough to be a non-routine accountant. You need to be a creative accountant. Well, not a creative accountant, but you know what I mean. You got to bring, we got enough of those, okay? You got to bring something extra to whatever it is you do. To just say now, I'm non-routine, I'm in that category, I'm safe, forget about that. Think of my story from India, okay? Think of the competitors I have now. I can't just show up and say, I'm Tom Friedman, New York Times columnist, gotta read me. No, you have millions of options now, and every day I've got to justify why you should read me over them. So what does all that mean? Well, I am first and foremost a reporter. So I do everything I do, everything I learn inductively. And so what we did for this book was, well, if that's what's going on at the macro level, then what is the employee, who is the employee that bosses around the country and the world are looking for? And so to find that out, we went out, did the obvious thing, we interviewed employers. We interviewed 4 generic employers, high-end white-collar, the head of a Washington-based national law firm, Nixon Peabody, interviewed their managing partner. Lower-end white-collar, the head of the outsourcing firm in India, where I wrote The World is Flat. Blue-collar, the head of DuPont, Ellen Kullman. And the head of the world's biggest green-collar firm, where it's just down the street, General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs and Staff, head of the U.S. Army Education Corps, when we interviewed him. And here's what's really interesting. These 4 generic employers are all looking for the same employee. And who are they looking for? They're looking for people who can do critical thinking and problem solving, ... in order to get an interview. Yeah, critical thinking and problem solving now is table stakes. We assume you can do that. What they're actually looking for are people who can do critical thinking and problem solving in order to be able to engineer, re-engineer, reinvent, and redesign their job while they are doing it. That's the extra that people are looking for, because in a hyper-connected world where change comes so fast, the mayor can't possibly be touching every department in his government. He can't keep up with the change. No human being could, and no boss can. And therefore, he needs people who are, as Ellen Kullman, the head of DuPont, said, who are always present. Who are always present. Who are always paying attention, seeing the openings and opportunities for a new service, a new product, a new idea, always looking to invent, reinvent, and re-engineer their job before it's done to them. That's what people are looking for. So interviewed, really got onto this, 2008, head of this Washington law firm, Nixon Peabody's absolutely a very close family friend, Jeff Leske. My wife grew up with his wife. We're out to dinner. Lehman Brothers has just melted down. I said to Jeff, what does this mean for your law firm? He says, business is way off. I said, well, what are you doing? He says, we're laying off lawyers. I said, well, that's interesting. In a law firm, who gets laid off first? Is it last in, first out? We say it used to be, but not anymore. Now what happened is, when we were in the bubble and we had all that work, and we'd hand it to non-routine lawyers, and they did it in a routine, non-routine way, and handed it back to us, a lot of them are gone. The ones we're keeping are those who took that work and said, Jeff, we could do this old work in a new way. Or we can do totally new work in a new way. His interview in the book ends with him announcing that his law firm just down the street here just hired a chief innovation officer. How many law firms do you know have a chief innovation officer? But every firm is going to need a chief innovation officer today. Law firm, accounting firm, you name it. Now the guy who runs the green collar firm, he's very interesting. As I said, that's General Martin Dempsey. You've heard his name because he's now chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but we actually interviewed him because at the time he was head of the U.S. Army Education Corps. So he's got a very interesting story to tell. In 2003, the first time you read his name, the reason you read about it in 2003 is that General Dempsey commanded the 1st Armored Division that took Baghdad from Saddam Hussein in 2003. He commanded the troops that took Baghdad. In 2008, he was promoted to commander of CENTCOM, the overall Middle East military command of the U.S. government. In that job, 5 years after he took Baghdad, he was out visiting a far-flung U.S. base in Afghanistan, out near the Hindu Kush, commanded by a U.S. Army captain. And he tells the story in the book. I spent 2 hours with that captain, and I realized after 2 hours that that captain, out there near the Hindu Kush, had access to more intelligence at the national and tactical level and could order up more firepower than I, General Martin Dempsey, could when I took Baghdad from Saddam Hussein 5 years earlier. So he came home, completely revamped the U.S. Army education curriculum. One of the things he introduced was giving new recruits an iPhone, first day of boot camp. 3 weeks into boot camp, you'll download the lesson, you'll teach the course. The drill instructor will sit in the front row. How we train that captain, how we promote that captain, how we select that captain now has to fundamentally change in a hyper-connected world when they are that empowered. So what does all this mean for DC? What it means is we have 2 educational challenges today. We need to bring our bottom to our average so much faster. Because if you are below average now, there is nothing for you down there that will sustain an average lifestyle. We need to bring our bottom to our average so much faster. But we need to bring our average to the global heights so much quicker because of where the competition is. The first is a challenge of the 3 R's. The first is about more reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I'd add a 4th R, rigor. The second is a challenge of the 3 C's, creativity, communication, and collaboration, all the things which nurture and inspire people to find their extra. That is the dual educational challenge that we face today. We need both more education and we need better education relevant to the challenge of the workforce today. One is about the 3 R's, the other is about the 3 C's. Let me conclude, because I want to save time for questions, by just preempting one question, which is one I get. What do you tell your kids? What do you tell your kids about how to lean into this world? I have a daughter, 27, the one who's been a teacher here. I have another who's 24 who works at National Public Radio. Here's what I tell my kids. I have 4 basic pieces of advice about how to lean into this world. First, think like a new immigrant. Second, think like an artisan. Third, think like a starter-upper in Silicon Valley. And fourth, think like a waitress at Perkins Pancake House in Minneapolis, just off Highway 100 and France Avenue, my favorite restaurant. So let me explain. First, think like a new immigrant. How does the new immigrant think? New immigrant thinks, I just showed up here in Washington, D.C., and there is no legacy spot waiting for me at Georgetown University. I better figure out what the opportunities are here, and I better pursue them faster and with more energy than anybody else. New immigrants are paranoid optimists. They are optimists because they picked up from somewhere and came somewhere they thought would be better. God bless them. Somewhere in our background, it applies to all of us. And at the same time, they're paranoid. They know nothing's owed them. Nothing's going to be given to them. They need to pursue the opportunity smarter, faster, more energetically than everybody else. Friends, think like a new immigrant. Stay hungry, because we are all new immigrants to the hyper-connected world. Second, think like an artisan. Who is the artisan? The artisan was that person in the Middle Ages, it's an idea from Larry Katz at Harvard, who made every item, before manufacturing, before mass manufacturing, before factories, made every item one-off, individually. The artisan made every pair of shoes individually, every utensil, every piece of furniture, every piece of clothing, every fork, spoon, and knife. The artisan made individually. And what did the best artisans do? Well, you know what they did. They took such pride in their work, they carved their initials into it at the end of the day. Do your job every day as if you brought so much extra to it, you'd want to carve your initials into it at the end of the day. Always think like an artisan. Third, think like a starter-upper. This is an idea of Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. You know, in Silicon Valley, there's just one 4-letter word. It actually isn't even 4 letters, but it does start with F. And that word is finished. If you ever think you're finished, you're done, your product is done, it's finished, it's perfected, then you really are finished. In Silicon Valley, all the best people and all the best products are permanently in beta. Beta is that stage in a product when it's about 4/5, 9/10, 7/8 done, but not done, and they throw it over the wall, that software, that iPod, and they let the community work on it and find the glitches and throw it back, and then they fix it up some more and they throw it over the wall again. Always be in beta, says Reid. Always think like a starter-upper. Always be in beta. Always be re-engineering, redesigning, perfecting, fixing, repairing, re-engineering again yourself. That's the way to lean into the world. Always be in beta. Always be reinventing and re-engineering yourself. Lastly, think like a waitress at Perkins Pancake House in Minneapolis. As I said, my favorite restaurant. I was back home working on this book. Sunday morning, 7 a.m., took my best friend, Ken Greer, to breakfast at Perkins Pancake House. I ordered, 3 scrambled eggs and 3 buttermilk pancakes. He ordered 3 buttermilk pancakes and fruit. And after 15 minutes, the waitress came down. She put our 2 plates down, and all she said to Ken was, "I gave you extra fruit." She got a 50% tip. And the reason she got a 50% tip was that waitress, she didn't control much, but she controlled the fruit ladle. And that was her extra, okay? That was her. She didn't control much, but she controlled that fruit spoon. And that was her extra. What was she doing in her own little way? She was thinking entrepreneurially. Think entrepreneurially in whatever you do. So friends, think like a new immigrant, stay hungry. Think like an artisan, take pride, bring your extra. Think like a starter-upper and always be in beta. And think like a waitress at Perkin Pancake House and always think entrepreneurially. Because we all now live in Garrison Keillor's Lake Wobegon, where all the men are strong, all the women are beautiful, and all the children need to be above average. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we have time for some questions, and you'll just let me know when I should get the hook. Fire away, anybody. Could somebody bring me a glass of water, though, or a bottle of water? That would be great. Just anybody. Please. Oh, yeah. I'll now work up. Please.
You talked about what you told your daughter.
Yes.
And for every middle-class kid in the country, that's doable.
Right.
We've got a group of young people who are not middle-class.
Right.
They're going to have to get to average and then some, is what I heard you say.
Right, absolutely.
Say a little more about that.
You know, I wish I had, and this is something we think about a lot. As I said, my daughter taught third grade in the district, and thanks so much. And my wife's involved with the seed school, so we think about this challenge a lot. And there is no simple answer. So one answer you'll hear, you know, most often from people is that it's the teachers. Break the teachers union, we'll be fine. Well, I'm married to it. My wife was a first grade reading teacher in Montgomery County, and so had my daughter. So I think we definitely need a better system for teachers. We want to definitely do what the best school systems in the world do. We want to recruit our teachers from the top 10% or at least 25% of their graduating classes. We want to pay them properly and incentivize them, and we want to have a system of review and checks, okay, that will promote the best and weed out the worst. We have it in every other profession. I'm all for that in a balanced way, and I think DC has been a leader in finding that balance, and I hail that, you know. But this isn't just a problem of teachers. And we cannot outsource this problem to teachers the way we outsourced the Iraq War to 0.5% of the American people, and the rest of us go shopping. So all you have to do is be married to a teacher to know that public school teachers in America are the biggest education philanthropists in this country. Okay, you total up how much teachers buy in cupcakes and crayons and equipment, okay, for their kids every year out of their own pockets. And our teachers are actually the biggest educational philanthropists in this country. So I do want a system that promotes, selects, and checks, reviews our teachers as rigorous as any other profession. And I'm really a big supporter of the reforms that have been done here and want to make sure they're in a balanced way. But whenever I hear people say it's a teacher problem, so my daughter's a teacher in DCPS, and 5 times a year someone sits in her class for 30 minutes, fills out an evaluation form, and on the basis of that evaluation really determines her promotion and status in her job. How many of us would like to sit in our office and 5 times a year someone comes in, watches you for 30 minutes, and determines how well you're doing? So we got to find a balanced way to do this, and a smart way. And I think we're getting there. But this is a collective action problem. We don't just need better teachers. We need better parents. We need parents who know what world they're living in and their kids are going to grow up in, and are going to ask their kids every day, what did you do in school? Did you do your homework? What book did you read? The people who do the PISA test, I wrote a column about this last year, did a study of the best performing students in the PISA exams. Kids whose parents did as little as, what did you do in school today? Those kids perform better on the PISA exams than parents who weren't involved. So we need better parents. We need better neighbors. We need neighbors who care about the quality of that public school in their neighborhood, whether they have kids in it or not. Because we know the statistics. You're either going to be building better public schools or more prisons. We know we can see just how the line works, okay? We need people who are interested in their public schools, okay, whether they have kids in them or not. And there's nothing like teacher involvement. I see that at Merch, my daughter's school, parental involvement to make a public school better. It pained me. I understand their reason for it, but I have to say, this is not a cheap shot, but it pained me that our president did not send his kids to the DC public school system. Do you know the impact on public education of Barack and Michelle Obama going to parent-teacher night twice a year with the entire White House press corps? What that could have been, okay? That was a lost opportunity. So we need better neighbors. We need better business leaders who care about the quality of the public schools in their city, whether they have kids in them or not, because they don't just say, I'm going to outsource somewhere. No, we need them to be committed, as you are here, to the public schools so they can get their employees who will also be their neighbors and customers. And lastly, we need better political leaders. I'm so thrilled the mayor is doing this. I wish every mayor in the city was coming to his people and saying, you got to understand what world we're living in, okay? And raising standards rather than dumbing them down. And lastly, we need better students. We need students who come to school ready to learn, not to text, who know what world they're growing up in. So what am I saying? I'm saying the best answer I can give you is this is a collective action problem. We all have some role to play in this, and none of us can afford to just sit back and say, it's all up to the teachers to make my kid better. Yeah.
You know, when I look at history and you sort of look at what happened, when farming was mechanized, people came off the farm, they went into factories, and decent jobs were available to people who are average. I know the Lake Wobegon point about everybody being above average, but isn't that really the economy that you're describing, where everybody's going to have to be above average, but we know that's not possible. Right. So then the question is, what do you do? And does this hyper-connected world lend itself to mass employment, right, as opposed to just, you know?
It's a really, really good and important question. Next question, please. No, it is really the $64,000 question. So I'll tell you how I approach it, okay? I'm a big believer everyone's above average at something. So my mom was in a nursing home out in Minneapolis for 10 years with Alzheimer's. How much would I have paid? How much would I pay? I'll tell you a lot. For that one nurse who always put a smile on my mom's face. There was one nurse there. Boy, she worked with my mom, always put a smile on. Somebody train her for that? That's not science, that's not math. That's just not showing up, you know what I mean? Not just showing up. You know, Woody Allen's dictum, 90% of life is just showing up. That is, as they say, N.A., no longer applicable. You just show up at the nursing home, well, yeah, you'll win it. You'll get an average wage there, do an average job, but you put a smile on my mom's face. You're a shopkeeper down here on K Street at a liquor store, a wine store. Just an example. I come in, I'm looking for wine. I don't know anything about wine. Boy, I suddenly meet the gal across the counter. They're experts in Merlots and Pinot Noirs. They've actually learned what they're selling. The person selling at the Gap store. Yeah, I know the latest in fashion. There's a lot more ways to show you're extra than just getting 800s on your SATs, okay? And that's what people, first of all, have to realize. All this interpersonal contact that we will pay more for, actually, if we only had people who are inspired to do it. And we all know the difference when we find it. We all know the difference. So, so that's one thing, that we all don't have to be Steve Jobs. We all aren't going to be Steve Jobs. The other thing you have to understand about the hyper-connected world is that every problem it creates a solution at the same time. I've just told you about the hyper-connected world. Remind me your name. You introduced, who asked the first question?
Connie.
Connie. So Connie was telling me earlier, she just opened a community college in DC 3 years ago, exploding with students seeking more learning and advancing themselves. So I was just out at Stanford. I was just out at Stanford and wrote a column about Coursera. You haven't heard about Coursera, but Connie is going to know all about Coursera real soon. 3 Stanford professors had the kind of free university online gig going, only they discovered one day that each had 100,000 students in their machine learning course. Not 1,000, not 10,000, they had 100,000 students online. And they said, wait a minute, first of all, this is a great business opportunity, thinking entrepreneurially. So you may have noticed Stanford, Princeton, Michigan, and the University of Pennsylvania have created a company called Coursera now, where you'll be able to take Daphne Kohler's applied computing course, machine learning course, online, but no, not just sit there in Bangalore and watch it online, or sit there in a neighborhood in Washington, D.C. and watch it online. Every 10 minutes, there'll be a test to review what you've learned. The lecture stops. Did you learn this? There are regular tests throughout the semester, and when you're done, you will get a certificate, not a diploma, but you'll get a certificate from Stanford that simply says you have completed this course online. So one day real soon, Connie's going to say, no, wait a minute, I got someone teaching computing here. And I got Daphne Kohler at Stanford teaching computing. And Daphne probably is a little better than the person I could hire here, but the person here is good. But I'm actually just going to pipe in Daphne's lectures, and I'm going to let my computer science teacher work daily, high touch, front and center with those students on the lecture, rather than wasting him or her repeating the same lecture that I can get world class now from Stanford. You know how much the diploma costs? $50. So Stanford tuition is, I know this because my daughter's leaving DC school system to go to Stanford Business School, is $40,200.50, okay? All right? All right? So now think of the opportunity for any energetic kid in DC, or by the way, in Bangladesh. Now I take 5 of these machine learning courses, and I take one in genomics. Then the newest biotech company to move into DC, thanks to the mayor, one day calls this Coursera and says, hey, we just moved to DC. Can you give me a list of the top 20 students in DC who passed your machine learning course and your genomics course? Because we're going to hire people. So forget manpower, all monster. Now you'll be able to be matched up as an employer exactly with the people you need. By the way, there's no incentive to cheat because you're fired the first day if you don't know the stuff. The only incentive is to learn. Because if you cheat, you're cheating yourself and you're gone after the first day. So the same system that's putting all this pressure over here is creating a remarkable low-cost solution over here to educate people, to bring people up that would never have that opportunity before at Stanford level. Harvard and MIT have formed their own. There's another one out there, got the name of it, one of the other Stanford. So you're going to see these explode in the next 3 years. What this is going to do for community colleges is enormous, because they're going to be able to pipe in the best lectures and then use their teachers in a so much more nurturing, efficient way, rather than having them repeat the same lectures, but working high touch with students face to face. So it's just an example. So the point is, I don't know the answer to your question, and it worries me a lot. Worries me a lot when I know I live in Bethesda, I'm 45 minutes from Baltimore. Biggest employer in Baltimore 50 years ago was Bethlehem Steel Company. Biggest employer, you could drop out of high school, join the steel union, earn a really average wage, buy an average house with an average yard, which 2.2 average kids and an average dog, work there for an average 30 years, go to Oriole game on weekends, and have a very nice average retirement. Biggest employer in Baltimore today is Johns Hopkins University Medical Center. Bethlehem Steel is gone. They don't let you cut the grass at Johns Hopkins without a BA, metaphorically speaking. So that's the change in a nutshell. Please.
How do you square the need that we have to move faster, the bottom to the average, etc., with the anti-intellectualism that is occurring in the country and the public denigration of higher education?
I square it by voting for Barack Obama. Oh, did I say that? I'm not supposed to say that. Don't tweet that, okay? Okay. I'm really sorry. That just popped out. You just got to defeat it. It's just, you can't, there's no logic to it. You can't talk people out of something they haven't really been talked into. It's just emotional, and the world will hammer them. Thank God I think it's really sort of a crazy strain. It isn't the mainstream of the country. I think it's not defining our labor market today. And it will, I think it will die of its own accord, because the world will just smack it in the face. Judge.
Yeah, I get to Krieger. You use that testing fourth R and the whole focus on the testing.
Right.
Because they seem to be mild target.
Yeah, you're best asking Kai about that. I mean, because I think it's a real challenge, and I think, judging from what I hear from my daughter, I think the DC, public school system is finding a good way to balance that. Bill Gates once said to me, we don't have any software engineers who aren't good at math and calculus. I mean, so you got to have the basics if you want to be creative, but you've got to have the basics. And it's true if you want to be a journalist, you got to be able to write. You got to know grammar. You got to be able to spell. You know what I mean? And there's just no way around that. There's no secret other than just hard work and knowing what world you're in. I don't think there's any magic formula. It's all the old-fashioned. I'm a really big believer. I've gotten in trouble for saying that I've actually never been on Facebook, I've never been on Twitter, and I've never smoked a cigarette. And I plan on dying saying all three. Okay, so I'm really a big believer in the old-fashioned stuff. Now I may get steamrolled, and the New York Times tweets my column and all that for me. But I did a book, Lexus and the Olive Tree, in 1999, and there was a line in there which I, really one I've often cited, which is that back then there was something called modems. Remember modems? And I argued at the time that every modem sold in America should have to come with a warning from the Surgeon General, and it would say, "Judgment not included." That is all stuff you cannot download. You got to upload it the old-fashioned way. Good values, good parenting, church, synagogue, temple, mosque, whatever it is, it's all the old-fashioned stuff actually matters more the more hyper-connected the world gets. Because what happens is our kids all interact nakedly now. You're not going to be there, I'm not going to be there when our kids are online on the web. And if you don't build the internal software into your citizens and your students so they can interact so nakedly and rapidly in a hyper-connected world, there's no filter, there's no technological fix. And it's all the old-fashioned stuff. It's reading, writing, arithmetic, church, synagogue, temple, mosque. That stuff actually matters more. And so I talk the talk of globalization and technology. I do not walk the walk. I really try to stay anchored and not get caught up. I'm a late adopter. Some people are early adopters. I'm a late adopter of everything, because I try to stay as connected to the old-fashioned stuff and values, because I really think they are what matter. And we can't, I'm all for machine learning, I'm all for internet education, but at the end of the day, it's about teachers, students, homework, good values, good parenting. All that stuff hasn't gone away. It actually matters more than ever. I unfortunately have to go to work now to bring my extra to my column for tomorrow. So thank you very much. Thank you. Real pleasure. Thank you.